The night Mara Whitaker sat beside me at that wedding, I was folding the program into a smaller and smaller square, trying not to look at the dance floor. There were yellow string lights hanging from the beams of the old barn, rain tapping softly against the black windows, and 100 people pretending they were not checking who had come alone. The air smelled like wet gravel, white roses, and the buttered rolls nobody wanted to admit they had eaten 3 of. I had picked the safest table in the room, back corner, near the exit, far enough from the music that nobody would mistake me for a man waiting to be asked. My name is Ethan Cole. I was 34, an inventory coordinator for a medical supply company in Des Moines, Iowa. That sounds more important than it is. Mostly, I made sure surgeons had the right boxes before someone's knee got opened up. I liked numbers because they stayed where you put them. People didn't. 3 years earlier, I had been standing in a grey suit outside a church basement, holding a boutonniere my hands had already crushed, when my fiancé's brother came out and told me she wasn't coming. Not sick, not delayed, just not coming. After that, weddings became something I attended only when not attending would create more questions than I had energy to answer. So I sat there, folding that program along the same crease until the paper started to split. Then the chair beside me scraped the floor. Mara Whitaker sat down like she had meant to sit there all along. At work, Mara was my opposite in every way that made people compare us. She ran projects like she was born with a clipboard in her hand. I ran inventory like the building might collapse if one barcode went missing. She used color-coded folders. I used quiet. She asked sharp questions in meetings. I answered only when the silence got too expensive. We have been called rivals so many times that neither of us corrected it anymore. That night, she wore a dark green dress with one sleeve slipping slightly at the shoulder, and her hair was twisted so tight it looked like it was holding back more than curls. There was a tiny smudge of mascara beneath her left eye. She must have missed it. She set her champagne glass down without drinking from it. "Cole," she said. "Whitaker." That was how we usually spoke. Last names. Like we were 2 teams on a scoreboard. Before I could ask why she had chosen the loneliest table in the room, her younger sister Nina leaned between us, wearing a pale blue bridesmaid dress and a grin she was doing a poor job hiding. She glanced at Mara first. Mara's fingers tightened around the edge of her napkin. Then Nina looked at me and whispered, "She saved you a dance." I thought I had misheard her. The band was playing something slow now, the kind of song that made older couples reach for each other without discussing it. Across the room, Derek Vance from sales turned his head our way. He saw Mara beside me. Then he smiled, not kindly. Derek had the kind of confidence that entered a room before he did and asked for a drink. At work, he called Mara Ice Queen when she corrected his numbers, then told everyone it was a joke. He called me warehouse husband material once in front of the quarterly team and waited for me to laugh with him. I had not laughed. That had made him like the joke more. Now his eyes moved from Mara to me, then down to the dance floor, as if he had just found the evening's entertainment. Mara saw him too. For half a second, the sharpness left her face. Not fear exactly. Something smaller, something practiced. She reached for her champagne glass, then stopped. "I didn't ask Nina to say that," she murmured. Nina, already backing away, said, "Yes, you did. With your face." Mara closed her eyes. I looked down at the folded wedding program in my hand. The crease had cut nearly through the couple's printed names. I should have made a joke. That was what men did when a moment got too honest. I should have said I didn't dance. I should have blamed my shoes, my knee, the rain, the moon, anything. Instead, I watched Derek whisper something to 2 men from accounting, and all 3 of them turned. Mara sat straighter, but her thumb kept rubbing the same corner of the napkin. That was when I understood. She had not come to me because I was safe in the easy way. She had come because I knew what it felt like to be looked at by a room and not give them the reaction they wanted. I unfolded the program once, then twice. "I don't dance to prove a point," I said. Mara looked at me. Her expression changed so quietly, most people would have missed it. "I know," she said. I stood up anyway, not fast, not dramatic. I just pushed back my chair, held out my hand, and let the room decide what it wanted to do with that. Mara looked at my hand like it was something she had expected and not expected at the same time. Then she placed her fingers in mine. They were cold. We walked toward the dance floor while Derek's smile thinned at the edges. The boards creaked under my shoes. The lights above us blurred gold in the rain-dark windows. I did not know the song. I did not know where to put my left hand. And I certainly did not know that one saved dance would follow me back to work on Monday, sit between us in every meeting, and change the way I understood the woman I had spent 2 years trying to beat. All I knew was this. Mara Whitaker had chosen the man at the back table. And for the first time in 3 years, I did not step away. Dancing with Mara Whitaker should have felt like losing a bet. That was the story everyone at work would have understood. Ethan Cole and Mara Whitaker, 2 people who could turn a budget meeting into a weather warning, standing under wedding lights with her hand on my shoulder and mine placed carefully at her back like I was handling glass. But it did not feel like a bet. It felt like standing near a locked door and hearing, for the first time, someone turn the key from the other side. Mara did not look at Derek. That was the first thing I noticed. She kept her eyes somewhere near the second button of my shirt, her chin lifted just enough to look composed from a distance. "You can relax," I said quietly. "I'm bad enough at this to distract everyone." One corner of her mouth moved. "Good. I was worried you'd be elegant. I've been accused of many things. Never that." The laugh she gave me was small, but real. It slipped out before she could make it professional. Derek noticed that too. By the time the song ended, he had made his way to the edge of the floor with a plastic cup in one hand and that salesman's smile on his face. "Well," he said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "this is a surprise. I didn't know inventory came with a romance department." A few people chuckled because people chuckle when they do not want to decide what kind of person they are in public. Mara's fingers started to leave mine. I held them for 1 second longer. Not enough to trap her, just enough to ask without words. She stayed. Derek looked at our hands. "Careful, Mara," he said. "Cole might start auditing your heart next." That got a louder laugh. Mara's jaw tightened. I had seen her correct million-dollar mistakes without blinking, but cheap embarrassment did something different to her. It pressed her inward. I wanted to say something sharp. I had several options ready. But sharp words are easy. They feel good for 5 seconds, then leave the room messier than before. So I looked at Derek and said, "You'd have to submit yours first. I'm still waiting on the paperwork." The laughter changed. Not louder, cleaner. Derek's smile flickered. Mara looked down quickly, but not before I saw it. The smallest break in her composure, like light under a door. We left the dance floor after that. Not together exactly, but not apart either. At the table, Nina appeared again with 2 slices of cake she had clearly stolen before the official cutting. "You both looked miserable," she said, putting one plate in front of Mara and one in front of me. "Very romantic." "Nina," Mara warned. "What? I'm supporting workplace cooperation." Mara took a fork and stabbed the cake like it had insulted her. There was a smear of frosting on the side of the plate. She stared at it too long. "You didn't have to do that," she said to me. "Dance? Answer him." "I didn't answer him. I answered the room." She looked at me then. That was the first time I understood that Mara's office confidence was not fake, but it was armor. Real armor still gets heavy. The wedding ended near midnight. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the gravel lot was full of puddles shining under the barn lights. I was walking toward my truck when I heard her behind me. "Cole." I turned. Mara stood beneath the overhang with her heels in one hand and her folded wedding program in the other. Her hair had loosened at the temples. The tight, polished version of her had begun to come undone. "Thank you," she said, "for being unelegant, for not making it worse." That sentence stayed with me. Not better, not perfect, just not worse. Sometimes that is the first kindness a person trusts. On Monday morning, the dance was waiting for us at work. It was in the way accounting stopped talking when I entered the break room. It was in the way two people from compliance smiled too politely at Mara. It was in the sticky note someone left on my desk. "Save me a dance?" Derek walked by just as I peeled it off. "Office morale is up," he said. "You're welcome." I folded the sticky note once and put it in the trash. Mara was standing at the printer, pretending not to see. Her project was due Friday, a distribution rebuild for 3 hospitals, the kind of thing nobody praised if it worked and everyone blamed if it failed. Derek had promised sales numbers he could not support. Mara had spent 2 weeks trying to make the operation match the promise. At 10 in the morning, she came to my desk with a binder against her chest. "I need your inventory variance reports from last quarter," she said. There it was, the old voice, clean, formal, no wedding lights in it. I opened the drawer and took out a folder. Already copied them. She blinked. "You knew I'd ask?" "I knew Derek would overpromise." "That wasn't the question. I knew you'd clean it up." Her hand rested on the folder, but she did not take it right away. A quiet choice still counts. She looked like she wanted to say something, then decided against it. "Thank you, Cole." "Ethan." The word came out before I could measure it. Mara's eyes lifted. For 2 years we had been Cole and Whitaker. Last names were safer. Last names kept meetings from becoming anything with a pulse. She nodded once. "Ethan," she said. Then she walked away with the folder held carefully, like it weighed more than paper. That week became a series of small things nobody else would have noticed. Tuesday, I found a coffee on the corner of my desk. Black, no sugar, from the place across from the parking garage. There was no note, but the cardboard sleeve had one line written in neat blue ink. "For the man who audits hearts." I turned toward Mara's glass office. She did not look up from her laptop, but her mouth knew I had seen it. Wednesday, I stayed late to reconcile a shipment error Derek had created by selling equipment we did not physically have. The warehouse lights hummed overhead. Rainwater dripped from the loading dock roof in slow, uneven taps. At 8:15, Mara appeared in the doorway, wearing her coat and carrying a paper bag. "You eat dinner?" she asked. I was hoping vending machine pretzels had evolved into a meal. She set the bag on a crate. "Turkey sandwich, no mayo." "You look like a no mayo man." That is either very observant or deeply insulting. Both can be true. We ate standing between pallets of surgical gloves and IV stands, the kind of romantic setting nobody writes songs about. She loosened her hair and retied it, not as tight this time. A strand fell near her cheek and stayed there. She told me Nina had cried during the father-daughter dance, even though she claimed allergies. I told her my brother once got drunk at a reception and tried to toast the wrong bride. Mara laughed with her mouth covered. "You don't talk much at work," she said. "Inventory listens more than it speaks." "That one of your rules?" "No, that one I made up because I'm tired." She leaned against a stack of boxes, looking at the concrete floor. "Derek told everyone I only got the hospital rebuild because I'm good at looking panicked in front of executives." I stopped chewing. "He said that?" "To 3 people who told 6 people. And you didn't report him?" She gave me a look. "You know how that goes." I did. Everyone did. The person who complains becomes the problem with paperwork. She folded the empty sandwich wrapper into a tight square, then unfolded it again. "I'm not fragile," she said. "I didn't think you were. You looked like you wanted to defend me." I did. "And?" I wiped my hands on a napkin. And then I remembered, you don't need a shield. You need room. Mara did not answer. The warehouse hummed around us. Pride makes noise. Want waits. On Thursday, the first real crack appeared in Derek's plan. He called a prep meeting for the hospital rebuild and arrived late, smiling, with no documents. Mara had a full packet ready. I had inventory numbers. Finance had cost projections. Derek had confidence. Confidence can look like leadership until facts enter the room. We don't need to drown everyone in operational anxiety, he said after Mara explained the shortfall. Mara kept her hands flat on the table. These aren't anxieties, these are quantities. He laughed. See? Ice Queen. No one moved. The words landed differently this time. Maybe because I did not look down. Maybe because Mara did not either. Maybe because the room was tired of pretending jokes were harmless just because the person telling them smiled. Mara opened her binder to the second tab. Ice melts, she said evenly. Numbers don't. She continued the presentation. I watched Derek realize, slowly, that she was not shrinking. After the meeting, Mara passed my desk without stopping. A minute later, a folded piece of paper slid under the edge of my keyboard. It was the wedding program from Saturday night. The corner was creased, like mine had been. On the back, in her neat blue handwriting, she had written, "The last dance is never about music." I sat there longer than I should have, one hand resting on the paper, listening to the ordinary office sounds around me. Phones ringing, printers coughing, someone laughing too loudly near the coffee machine. A life does not always change with thunder. Sometimes it changes when a woman who used to call you by your last name leaves proof that she remembered where you were standing when she chose you. By Friday afternoon, the hospital rebuild was ready. Mara had built the plan. Finance had signed off. I'd confirmed every unit in the warehouse twice. Derek had contributed mostly perfume and interruption. The final presentation was set for Monday's company gala, where the board would announce which department would lead the regional expansion. Derek wanted that title. Mara deserved it. At 5:40, I found her alone in the conference room, surrounded by binders, highlighters, and one untouched cup of tea gone cold. She had taken off one shoe and was pressing her thumb into the arch of her foot. "You okay?" I asked. She looked at the table. "I hate being watched." "That's unfortunate. You picked a public presentation." "I don't mean presenting." She took a breath. "I mean being watched by people hoping I'll become smaller." I stepped inside but stayed near the door. There are moments when closeness has to ask permission. "You won't," I said. "You don't know that." "No, but I know you've been practicing not to." She looked at me then, tired in a way that made her more herself, not less. "Why are you being nice to me?" I could have said because of the dance, because of the coffee, because of the sandwich in the warehouse. Because somewhere between barcode reports and bad jokes, she'd stopped being my rival and become the person I looked for first when I entered a room. But some truths arrive too early if you say them wrong. So I said, "Because you are tired of people mistaking kindness for weakness." Her eyes shone, but nothing fell. She nodded once. Then she reached across the table and slid me a copy of Monday's presentation. "Can you check the inventory appendix?" I took it. "Only if you eat something." That sounds like a negotiation. It's an operational requirement. For the first time that week, she smiled without hiding it. We worked until the cleaning crew came through and the building lights switched to their after-hours dimness. She ate half a granola bar from my desk drawer and accused it of tasting like cardboard with ambition. I fixed 2 formulas in her appendix. She corrected 3 typos in my notes. We argued for 4 minutes about whether supply chain integrity sounded too dramatic. When we left, the parking lot was quiet. Mara stood beside her car, keys in hand, looking up at the dark office windows. Ethan, she said. I liked my name in her voice more than I had any right to. Yes? If Monday goes badly, it won't. If it does, she said, firmer now, don't make it your job to rescue me. I understood then what she was asking. Not for help. For respect. I put my hands in my coat pockets. I'll stand where you can see me, I said. That's all. Mara looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Good. She opened her car door, then paused. And Ethan? Yeah? At the wedding? She looked down once, then back at me. Nina didn't lie. The door closed before I could answer. Her taillights pulled away through the dark lot, red fading into the wet street. I stood there with the presentation folder under my arm and the folded wedding program in my pocket, understanding far too late that the last dance had not ended at the barn. It had only started counting. Monday night, the company gala was held in a hotel ballroom that smelled like lemon polish, expensive flowers, and people pretending they were comfortable in suits. I arrived early. Not because I belonged there. I didn't. My tie felt too tight. My shoes looked too new. And every time I passed a mirror, I saw a man trying to look like he had not spent most of his life in stockrooms, loading bays, and break rooms with bad coffee. But Mara had asked me to stand where she could see me, so I did. I stood near the second row, left side of the room, close enough to the stage that she would not have to search. The ballroom had round tables covered in white cloth, tall centerpieces blocking half the conversations, and a small dance floor waiting under the chandeliers. In the corner, a jazz trio tested their instruments with soft little fragments of songs that never quite began. I touched the folded wedding program in my jacket pocket. I had carried it all weekend. That was not like me. Then Mara entered. She wore a navy dress this time, simple and clean, with her hair down around her shoulders. Not perfect, one side kept falling forward, and she kept pushing it back with 2 fingers while trying not to look nervous. Derek saw her before I did. Of course he did. He crossed the room with 2 board members beside him already performing. He had the kind of laugh that asked everyone to agree before the joke arrived. Mara, he said, ready to explain why operations turned a clean sales opportunity into a hostage negotiation? The board members smiled politely. Mara stopped walking. For 1 second I saw the old motion start in her hand. Thumb to napkin. Only there was no napkin this time. Then she looked past Derek. She found me. I did nothing. That was the promise. No rescue, no interruption, no stepping in front of her moment because it made me feel useful. I just stood there, hands at my sides. Mara turned back to Derek. Ready, she said. Not loud. Enough. The presentation began 15 minutes later. Derek went first. He gave the kind of speech men give when they believe confidence is the same as preparation. He talked about growth, vision, expansion, opportunity. He used both hands too much. He pointed at the screen before the slide changed. People nodded because people nod when they hear expensive words in a hotel ballroom. Then Mara walked onto the stage with 1 binder, 1 remote, and no smile. She did not begin by attacking him. That would have been easier. She began with the hospitals. She showed delivery windows, staffing shortages, equipment counts, real patient impact. She explained that a delayed shipment was not a spreadsheet inconvenience. It was a surgery rescheduled. A nurse apologizing for something she did not cause. A family waiting beside a phone. The room got quieter. Derek shifted in his chair. Mara clicked to the next slide. This is the gap between what was promised and what we can physically deliver, she said. And this is the cost of pretending the gap does not exist. The chart came up. Clean, brutal, undeniable. A few people leaned forward. Derek laughed once, soft and dismissive. With respect, he said from his table, though there was none in his voice. Mara tends to make normal business risk sound like a house fire. Mara looked at him. Then she looked at the board. I brought the fire report. She clicked again. Email timestamps. Sales projections. Inventory warnings. My variance reports. Finance approvals. Every piece laid out in order. Not dramatic, not emotional. Worse for Derek than either. True. The ballroom changed temperature. Derek's smile stayed on his face, but it no longer belonged there. Mara did not rush. She did not raise her voice. She did not call him careless or arrogant or cruel, even though all three words would have fit. She just kept building the room around the facts until there was nowhere left for him to stand. When she reached the final slide, she set the remote down. For the last 6 months, she said, I was told I was difficult because I asked where the promises ended and the inventory began. No one moved. I was told I was cold because I would not make numbers prettier than they were. I was told I was slowing growth because I refused to send hospitals equipment we did not have. Her eyes moved briefly to Derek, then away. I am not here to be liked by a bad plan. The room went completely still. I am here to build one that survives contact with real people. That was when the first person clapped. Not me, Nina. She had come in quietly and taken a seat near the back, still wearing a coat over her dress like she had rushed from somewhere. Her hands met once, then again. Then finance joined, then compliance, then one of the board members. The applause did not explode. It grew. Steady, uncomfortable, honest. Derek stood up too quickly. This is absurd, he said. She's using internal material to embarrass a colleague. Mara looked at him calmly. No, she said. You used internal silence to protect yourself. I'm finished lending it to you. That sentence did what shouting could not have done. It closed the door. The board chair asked Derek to step outside with HR before the next agenda item. He looked around the ballroom as if searching for someone willing to call the facts rude. No one did. When he passed Mara, he lowered his voice. You think this makes you look strong? Mara did not flinch. I think it makes me done. He left. The ballroom door shut behind him with a soft click. Small sounds can end large performances. I wanted to go to her then. Every part of me wanted to cross the room, take the binder from her hands, tell her she had done it. But she had. Not me. So I stayed where she could see me. Mara looked over. Her face did not break, not fully, but something in her shoulders finally set down its weight. After the presentation, the board announced that Mara would lead the regional expansion plan with operations and finance support. Derek's department would be reviewed separately, which was corporate language for a storm arriving in polished shoes. People came up to congratulate her. Some meant it. Some were trying to stand close to the winner after waiting too long to decide what was right. Mara accepted each handshake with the same calm expression. Nina hugged her too hard and whispered something that made Mara close her eyes. I waited near the edge of the dance floor, holding 2 glasses of water because champagne seemed like too much for whatever this was. When Mara finally came over, she looked at the glasses, then at me. Water, she said. Operational requirement. Her mouth curved. You remembered. I'm inventory. Remembering is most of the job. She took 1 glass and drank half of it before speaking again. You didn't step in. You told me not to. A lot of men hear that as a suggestion. I'm bad at dancing, not listening. She looked down, and for a moment the room moved around us without touching us. Then the band began a slow song, not the same one from the wedding, but close enough to hurt a little before it warmed. Mara heard it too. She set her glass on a nearby table. Ethan? Yes? At the wedding, I saved you a dance because I wanted one thing that night to be mine. I did not answer right away. Some truths deserve room. She continued, quieter now. I was tired of being impressive to people who didn't care if I was tired. I was tired of being sharp, because soft gave people ideas. And I was tired of pretending I didn't notice you being kind in rooms where nobody rewarded it. The folded wedding program felt heavy in my pocket. Mara. She shook her head once, barely. Let me finish before I become sensible again. So I waited. Her fingers touched the edge of the table, then left it. I didn't choose you because Derek was watching, she said. I chose you before he looked. That undid something in me I had tied too tightly years ago. Being chosen feels different when you stopped asking. I took the wedding program from my jacket pocket and unfolded it carefully. The creases were deep now. The names of the bride and groom had nearly worn soft from being handled. Mara saw it. You kept it. I didn't know where else to put the evidence, she laughed under her breath, and this time she did not hide it. I held out my hand. No audience mattered this time. No Derek. No joke waiting at the edge of the room. No old church basement. No brother stepping outside with a crushed boutonniere and a sentence that would take 3 years to stop echoing. Just Mara. Just me. Just the song. The last dance is never about music, I said. She placed her hand in mine. No, she said. It's about who stays. We danced better that time. Not well, better. I still stepped too carefully. Mara still tried to lead when she got nervous. Once she laughed because I turned the wrong way and nearly sent us into a table of compliance managers. But she did not let go. Neither did I. And in the middle of that hotel ballroom, with rain starting again against the tall windows, I realized the dance I had feared for 3 years had never been the one with music. It was the one where someone asks you to believe the floor will hold. 6 months later, the folded wedding program was still on my kitchen shelf, tucked beside Mara's blue coffee sleeve and a tiny brass nameplate from the first regional warehouse she opened under her own leadership. Derek left the company before Christmas. No one said fired. No one had to. Mara did not celebrate it. She just worked, built, hired carefully, and stopped apologizing before giving correct answers. On Friday nights, she came over with takeout and project notes she swore she was not going to discuss. By spring, half her books had migrated to my living room. By summer, Nina had started calling my place the office with better snacks. One evening, Mara stood in my kitchen wearing one of my old sweatshirts, her hair loose, reading the back of a cereal box like it contained quarterly projections. You're staring, she said. I'm auditing. My cereal. My life. She looked up then. I thought of the back table at the wedding, the folded program, the cold fingers in my hand, the woman everyone called Ice, because they had never bothered to learn what she was protecting. I had thought she sat beside me because she needed somewhere to hide. I was wrong. She had been brave enough to choose. I had only been lucky enough to notice. A year after that first wedding, we went to Nina's birthday party in the same barn venue. The string lights were still there. The gravel lot still held puddles after rain. Mara saved me the last dance again. This time she did not need her sister to tell me.